What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Cosmic Wonder. I'm your host, Warren Thompson, and we just watched the Moon Knight finale, and boy, was it a great finale. But it does seem like there's a little bit of division on this, so I want you to let me know right away what you thought about the finale in the comments down below. Rate it 1 out of 10. I loved it. Let me know what you think. There was a lot to unpack in this episode, specifically at the very end. So we're going to do a quick recap of all the important things you need to know about this episode, and then talk about that ending and explain everything you need to know, including whether or not Khonshu is actually gone, or is he simply manipulating Marc and Steven. And we got to talk about Jake Lockley. So a lot to talk about in this video. Let's jump right into it. And of course, if you're new, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the latest videos. Okay, so Moon Knight episode 6 pretty much picks up where episode 4 left off, actually, when Harrow shot Marc Spector and he died. Harrow and his men pull Marc's body out of the water so they can grab Amit's Ushabti. Now Harrow has everything that he needs to release Amit, and his staff even changes. Instead of having 2 crocodile heads, which represent the head of Amit, which is a crocodile head, it now has only one, and the other side has turned into an axe. And his cane has actually gotten a lot longer here as well, turning more into like a staff. So Harrow and his men leave to the Great Pyramid of Giza, which we find out later. Now, something important to notice is that Harrow actually leaves the scarab on Marc's body. Now, as we know, the scarab is actually a compass that points to Amit's Ushabti. So Layla, after kind of saying her goodbyes to Marc, picks up the scarab and knows exactly where Harrow is because of the compass. Now, we immediately see that Harrow actually has more power now that he has the Ushabti. On his way to the Great Pyramid of Giza, he is stopped by the Egyptian Patrol Agency. And Harrow knows that he now has greater power, so he gets out, not worrying about all of the guns pointing at him, and he automatically starts using his power to judge people. And all of them actually die, but one of them. Now remember, they're being judged prematurely. Some of them might not have even committed the so-called sin that will condemn them to a bad judgment. But only one is left, and he is deemed a good man by Arthur. Now Layla actually managed to sneak onto one of Arthur's trucks. Her plan now, since Marc and the abilities of Khonshu and Moon Knight are gone, is to simply sneak up on him and stab him to death. But the Egyptian goddess Taweret interferes by communicating with her through dead bodies, and she relays to her that Marc could actually return. However, Layla thinks that she can still do it on her own, so she continues to follow Harrow. Now, if you actually notice during the scene, Harrow seems kind of uneasy, and it seems to be at first that he kind of knows that Layla's there. However, I think it's something different. I think that he knows he's about to come face to face with Amit, and he knows that his scales are unbalanced. Obviously, we see this scene play out, and he thinks that he's going to be judged and probably killed, so this is probably why he seems a little uneasy here. Back to that in a bit. We then get inside of the Chamber of the Gods and the Great Pyramid of Giza, quite possibly one of the most annoying scenes in the MCU. The avatars and their gods have felt a disturbance. And even at first, some of the gods don't really know what's up, until the avatar of Hathor says someone is trying to release Amit. And this is super frustrating, because if they would have just taken at least 1 minute to investigate what Khonshu and Marc were saying in the very beginning, this could have all been avoided. Like literally, just could have taken 1 minute to investigate the accusation, instead of simply just trusting the person that is being accused of trying to release an evil god. And of course, it's too late. Harrow shows up and defeats all of the avatars. And we find out that the only thing you actually need to do to release these gods is simply break the Ushabti. So Harrow breaks the Ushabti of Amit and she is released, and she actually looks pretty freaking cool. Meanwhile, Layla is looking for the Ushabti of Khonshu so she can release him. Now, what's really interesting here is that Amit doesn't actually know who Harrow is. She literally asks, "To whom do I owe my gratitude?" So this actually answers a question that a lot of people have had. It seems that Amit didn't actually give the staff to Harrow. He somehow happened upon it. He did say it was given to her first avatar, which clearly is not him because we see him become her avatar, which means the power that he had was simply inside of the staff that came from Amit. Now you gotta give it to Harrow. He truly does believe in everything that he's doing. He accepts that he probably is going to die. And even when Amit fights him and says, "No, you should be my avatar," he actually says that there are other people out there who worship and follow her who have balanced scales. So crazy credit to where crazy credit is due. He practices what he preaches, and he truly does believe in what he is trying to do. despite the fact that it's going to kill probably billions of people. Meanwhile, Layla manages to release Khonshu, and he tries to get her to be his avatar, but she actually sees through his manipulative ways and says no. So he bails. Meanwhile, Amit says let's go cleanse the souls of Cairo, essentially let's go judge everybody and probably kill most of the people. But then we pick up where the last episode left off. Marc is in the field of reeds, and Steven is left behind in the sand, frozen. And what's interesting here is it's not an actual true paradise. Taweret says that he made it, he's essentially in heaven and that he has no worries anymore, but he does. How could he ever truly have peace knowing that Steven was back there in the sand? He wouldn't actually ever have peace. This would never actually be paradise for him. So he goes back to Steven, who happened to be frozen in sand right in front of the gate of Osiris. He delivers a very heartwarming speech, and eventually, after he turns to sand glass as well, the two of them are resurrected. Their souls go back to the shot up body, and Khonshu's powers wrap them up in the Moon Knight robes, and they are healed. And they are ready to go to battle, but not before they renegotiate the deal with Khonshu. And although they do work out a new deal, it is not what they think it is, and we're about to talk about that in just a sec. Now, before Marc and Steven actually go back to the body, Khonshu actually tries to stop Amit himself, and they have a very awesome god fight. It gets even more awesome when they both become insanely large and fight in Egypt, but the whole gods fighting gods is pretty cool. Meanwhile, the avatar of Osiris tells Layla that they need more avatars, but he tells her that they need to trap her inside of a body, not a statue. She'll be more vulnerable. So Layla decides to become an avatar herself. Taweret takes over, and a new Egyptian hero is born, which I'm about to talk about in just a second and fully explain. So now Amit is released, and her followers have so much more power. Now it seems like any follower of Amit has the ability to judge somebody, as Amit, along with Harrow, has placed scales on everybody's arms. And of course they're being judged, and there are a lot of what Amit would call bad people out there. So they die, and their apparent souls feed Amit and make her even stronger, as she grows to be the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza itself. Now, Layla all of a sudden has the powers of Taweret by being her avatar. She gets her own suit as well, and it looks ridiculously awesome. And what this hero basically is the Scarlet Scarab from Marvel Comics, but with a little twist. Now, in the comics, it's actually her father, Abdul Fal, who is the Scarlet Scarab. Eventually, he would go on to pass down the mantle to his son, but it is kind of cool how the MCU changed this a bit. Now, in the comics, the Scarlet Scarab gets his powers from the Ruby Scarab, and that's something they clearly changed in the MCU. Here, Layla clearly gets her powers from Taweret, being her avatar. But if you notice, there are actually some similarities in the costumes. And if you look right below her neck, you can actually see a scarab. Now, the costumes are obviously a little bit different because the Scarlet Scarab is a man in the comics, and Layla is obviously a woman. But if you look at the part around her neck, that is extremely similar. And if you look at the parts on her wrists, those are extremely similar as well. And overall, this outfit looks amazing, and she has wings, and it's the first Egyptian superhero in the MCU, and that's super cool. And she means some serious business when she flies in to save Marc/Steven. She kicks Arthur, and then when he goes to hit her with a blast, she deflects it back and knocks him back way down. Now obviously Moon Knight shows up and he starts to battle Arthur, but only it's not just Moon Knight now, and it's not just Marc. They're all kind of working together. Moon Knight, Mr. Knight, Marc, and Steven. And when they fight together, it's really cool to see them switch back and forth. Now, eventually Amit, after trying to get Khonshu to join her and kind of roll at her side, in which she says no, eventually kind of defeats Khonshu, and eventually Arthur kind of defeats Marc/Steven and Layla. However, there is another rescuer here. Right as Layla and Marc were about to die, Marc's eyes roll back, he blacks out, and he wakes up, and everyone, with the exception of Harrow, is dead. But Harrow's pretty much dead. He's on the brink of dying. Marc immediately goes, "That wasn't you, was it, Steven?" Layla even asks what the heck happened, and Marc says, "I blacked out." And of course, as we know, this was Jake Lockley. He was revealed in the mid-credit scene, and we're about to talk about him a lot. But to finish off the important parts that you need to know and the recap of the episode, Layla and Marc take Harrow's body back to the Chamber of the Gods along with his staff, and they end up binding Amit to Harrow's body, which renders her powerless. Now, Khonshu tells Marc to end him, end Harrow, and in turn end Amit, but Marc is done doing Khonshu's work. He says, do it yourself and also release me. That was the deal. So he releases him, but we soon find ourselves back at the psychiatric ward. And Steven and Marc are meeting with Dr. Harrow again. But right away, notice that Steven and Marc are still working together. They're still in sync. They're a little confused at first, but they see blood coming from Harrow's foot. And Marc even says, hey, you see that, don't you? And Steven says, oh yeah, I see it. And Harrow is actually quite confused. He asks why he's bleeding. Now, this is a callback to the very first scene of Moon Knight, where Harrow breaks up glass, puts it in his shoes, and walks on them. But Marc and Steven realize that this is all in their head, and they choose to wake up. And the big thing to take away here is that it looks like both of them have equal control over the body. They have accepted that they are a part of each other, and they're going to live the rest of their lives with each other. So they're working together. However, and unfortunately, there is a third personality inside of Marc/Steven. And we are introduced to this person in the post-credit scene, and that person is Jake Lockley. We've been talking about him for a couple of episodes now. He's kind of popped up when Marc and Steven go unconscious and they realize that neither of them had control over the body, but the body has committed murder. That was Jake Lockley. And Jake Lockley clearly doesn't really have much of a conscience. This is a different side to Marc, and there's a lot to digest here. Now, it looks like Marc and Layla kind of took a page out of the book of Marc and Steven's head, and they put Arthur Harrow in a psychiatric ward, and they keep him meted up and restrained there so that Amit could never get out, but that way they don't actually have to kill Arthur. However, a mysterious person speaking Spanish manages to kidnap Arthur, and he puts him in a limo where we see Khonshu. And notice Khonshu is actually dressed in a suit, much like Stephen Grant's Mr. Knight was. It looks like Khonshu actually liked that look and has somewhat adapted it for himself. Now, when Arthur sees Khonshu, he laughs and says, "You can't hurt us." Notice he says us because Amit is now sealed to him. However, we didn't know how manipulative Khonshu actually was. For example, he expresses that Marc truly believed that after he and Khonshu parted ways, he would go after Layla, his wife. Khonshu acts like this was funny, but he did actually threaten Marc with this in previous episodes. He would say stuff like, "May I remind you who I want as my next avatar?" He said that in episode 2, implying that he was actually going to make Layla his avatar. But that was just Khonshu being manipulative to try and get Marc and Steven to do what he wanted. Because here we are introduced to Marc's third alter, Jake Lockley, the ruthless man who has been killing the entire time when Marc and Steven didn't know who it was. And he is ruthless. If you notice in the psychiatric hospital, which is the Sankai-Witch psychiatric hospital, Jake actually killed a bunch of the workers so he could get Arthur out of there. And these are very, very innocent people. But he doesn't care at all. He kills them just to get what he wants. Nothing stands in his way, including Arthur Harrow and Amit. Khonshu says Marc has no idea how troubled he truly is. And he introduces Jake, and Jake kills Arthur and Amit. And this actually answers a question that I had, because in episode 3, Khonshu was there with Marc and Steven when the alter ego took over, who they didn't know at the time, killed everybody. Khonshu said nothing, but he saw it all, and he clearly knew that it was neither of the two. But now we know that it was Jake Lockley the entire time. And it seems like Khonshu has a lot of control over Jake Lockley. Now, the big question that a lot of people are probably wondering, and that I've been asked a lot last night, is did Khonshu really leave Marc and Steven? And the answer to this is no. He still basically has control over their bodies. However, they don't know it because they aren't really aware of Jake Lockley. I'm sure they are aware that somebody else killed those people, but they definitely have no idea that Khonshu is still using that third alter ego as his avatar. And since they all share the same body, and since Marc is actually the original person, that means that Marc, and therefore Steven, is still the avatar for Khonshu. Khonshu is simply hiding it from them because it turns out he is a manipulative jerk. But this is kind of good news because the Moon Knight series was awesome, and the introduction of Jake Lockley and Khonshu still being there means that we have a lot of unanswered questions for the future of Moon Knight, but it looks like they are going to answer them since they did introduce Jake. And remember, there are a lot of things coming up for Marvel. And with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, they are definitely introducing a more occult side, a more darker side of the MCU, which means there's plenty of room for Moon Knight and Blade and Deadpool and the Midnight Suns to come in. And at this point, it does look like they have set up a season 2 for Moon Knight, despite whatever they may have said before. I am now fully expecting a season 2 for Moon Knight, which is great because this season was fantastic. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. And of course, I'll be doing more videos breaking down more things about the finale of Moon Knight soon. Be sure to rate the finale in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video and of course subscribe so you can stay up to date on all the latest MCU news. For live updates, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Woof woof.